They say Christmas is the season of giving. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the most valuable gift you can receive is the truth about where you actually stand in someone's life. I learned that truth on Christmas night, sitting at a dining table in a house I technically owned, watching my son and his wife hand out presents to every single person in that room. Every person except me. But before I tell you what happened at that table, let me ask you something. How was your Christmas? Was it everything you hoped for, or did something happen that left you feeling hurt, invisible, forgotten? Maybe you're listening to this right now while you're cleaning up leftover decorations or sitting in your car or lying in bed trying to make sense of your own family drama. I want you to know you're not alone. My name is Isabel Rodriguez. I'm 72 years old, retired from nursing for 6 years now, and I've been a widow for just as long. 4 days ago, I sat at what was supposed to be a joyful family Christmas dinner and discovered exactly how much I mattered to the people I'd sacrificed everything for. The house was packed that night. My son Daniel and his wife Sylvia had been bragging for months about hosting their first big family Christmas. "We're doing it right this year, Mom," Daniel had told me back in October, his voice full of pride. "Finally feels like we have a real family home." A real family home. That phrase stuck with me, especially since it was built on the equity from the little house I'd sold when I retired. But Sylvia never mentioned that part when she posted photos of their beautiful kitchen or their spacious backyard on social media. I'd spent most of Christmas Day in that kitchen, my back aching from standing at the counter. No one makes sweet potatoes quite like I do, or so Daniel always says. I didn't mind the cooking. It kept my hands busy. Gave me a purpose. That's what mothers do. Right? We find ways to be useful. By the time dinner was over and the dishes were pushed aside, I was ready to sit down and just enjoy the evening. The table was crowded with faces. Linda and Robert Brennan, Sylvia's parents, sat near the head laughing at something Daniel had said. A few couples from their church filled the middle seats, along with Mrs. Patterson, the kids' piano teacher, a sweet woman who always remembered to compliment my pies. And then there was Carla. Even Carla was there, the young woman who comes every Friday to clean their house, sitting quietly in her plain work polo near the end of the table. I should have known something was off when Sylvia kept glancing at me throughout dinner with this strange little smile, like she was holding a secret that made her feel powerful. Then she stood up and clapped her hands together. "Okay, everyone, time for presents." She pulled out this enormous gift bag, the kind you see in holiday commercials, tied with ribbons and stuffed with tissue paper. She looked like she was hosting some kind of glamorous event, her smile wide, her voice bright. "Mom," she said, turning to Linda, first sliding a box with a designer label across the table. "You are going to absolutely love this." Linda opened it with a delighted gasp, pulling out a cashmere scarf that probably cost $200. They hugged. People clapped. "Dad," Daniel said next, handing Robert a long, narrow package. "Something for the golf course." More laughter. More toasts with wine. The kids squealed as they tore into their gifts. Gaming controllers for Tommy, my 8-year-old grandson. A smartwatch for Emma, who just turned 6. Brand new sneakers with lights in the soles that made her jump up and down with excitement. Then Sylvia reached back into the bag and pulled out a small envelope. She walked it down to the end of the table, right to Carla. "This is for you," Sylvia said warmly, handing her a gift card tucked inside glittery paper. "You work so hard for us. We appreciate you." Carla looked genuinely touched. "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez," she said softly, her cheeks flushing. "That's very kind." I smiled at her from across the table. "You've earned it, honey," I said. "Those bathrooms alone deserve hazard pay." Everyone laughed. Sylvia beamed, clearly pleased with herself for being so generous. I waited. There were still boxes in the bag. I could see the shapes of them through the tissue paper. My name hadn't been called yet, but I wasn't worried. There was always something for me. A scarf, a book, a mug with some jokey grandma phrase on it. It wasn't about the value of the gift. It was about being remembered, about being seen. Sylvia pulled out another small box, checked the tag, and handed it to Mrs. Patterson. Another box went to one of the church friends. Then she reached into the bag one last time, turned it upside down with a little flourish, and shook it. Tissue paper floated down to the floor. She laughed. "Oh, that's it, I think." The room buzzed with thank yous and the sound of wrapping paper being crumpled. Chairs scraped against the floor. People leaned over to admire each other's gifts. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "Sylvia," My voice came out steady, maybe too steady. Did one maybe slip under the table? She turned to look at me, and I saw it. That little flicker in her eyes, like she'd been waiting for me to say something, like this was part of the show. Oh! Her lips curved into a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Did yours not arrive? She snapped her fingers as if suddenly remembering something amusing. Oh, right. The tracking said there was some kind of issue. Your gift must have been… She paused for effect. Misplaced in transit. She shrugged, already turning back to the others. You know how these shipping companies are during the holidays. Across the table, Daniel was watching me. Just watching. I saw the moment where he could have stepped in, where he could have said, Sylvia, don't be ridiculous. Of course Mom has a gift. He didn't. Instead, he smirked. Actually smirked. It'll sort out Mom, he said, lifting his wine glass like we were toasting something. Probably New Year's delivery. We all know you're patient. A few people laughed. Not loud, but just enough. Just enough to sting. Even Carla looked down at her gift card, embarrassed, turning the envelope over and over in her hands. They were waiting for it. I could feel it in the air. They wanted the awkward grandma moment. The protest, the tears, the fuss, the scene. They could talk about later, shaking their heads and saying, She's so dramatic. You know how older people get about these things. But something happened inside me in that moment. Something went very still. The way water goes flat and quiet right before a storm rolls in. I folded my napkin, set it carefully beside my empty plate, and looked at Sylvia. All right, I said. That was it, just that one word. No quiver in my voice, no pleading, no explanation. Sylvia blinked. Just once. That wasn't the line she'd been expecting. Mrs. Patterson tried to smooth things over. Isabel, your pies were absolutely incredible tonight. I smiled at her, genuine and warm. Thank you, sweetheart. I'm glad you enjoyed them. Then I stood up. I should get going, I said. I like to drive before it gets too late. But Mom, Daniel said, and he actually sounded surprised now. We were going to do family photos. I looked around the table at all those faces. Linda and Robert, their church friends, Mrs. Patterson, even Carla still clutching her little envelope. You've got plenty of family here, I said quietly. Looks like a full picture to me. Daniel's eyes narrowed, trying to read me. Sylvia had already pulled out her phone, scrolling like I was a commercial break she had to sit through. I kissed Tommy and Emma on their heads. Bye, sweethearts. Text me pictures of your new toys later, okay? On my way to the front door, I passed through the kitchen one last time. I heard voices behind me. Low, but not quite low enough. She'll get over it, Linda murmured. She always does, Sylvia replied. Besides, maybe next time she'll remember not to embarrass us. There was a sting behind my eyes, sharp and hot, but I pushed it down deep where it belonged. Outside, the cold December air hit my face. I walked to my car alone, my hands perfectly steady on my keys. They thought they'd given me nothing that night. They were wrong. They'd given me permission. The drive back to my condo took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. My mind kept replaying the scene, Sylvia's smirk, Daniel's silence, the way everyone else got a gift. Even Carla, who'd only worked for them for 6 months. I wasn't crying. That surprised me. I thought I would cry. Instead, I felt something colder, clearer, like I'd been looking at a painting from too close up for years, and now I'd finally stepped back far enough to see what it actually was. When I got home, I hung up my coat, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the hall closet. On the top shelf behind the Christmas tablecloth and a box of ornaments I hadn't used in years sat a weathered blue folder, Parker Lane closing documents. I pulled it down, sat at my dining table, and opened it for the first time in over a year. The pages were crisp, official, covered in legal language and signatures. I flipped through them slowly until I found the section the loan officer had pointed to 3 years ago. There it was, clear as day. The owner reserves the right to terminate occupancy of the property with 30 days written notice delivered via certified mail for any reason deemed necessary by the owner. For any reason. I read that line 3 times, letting each word settle. For years, I'd treated that clause like it didn't exist. Like it was just a formality, something on paper that would never actually matter. But sitting there in the silence of my condo, still tasting the humiliation of that dinner, I realized something. It mattered now. I closed the folder and set it on the table in front of me. Outside my window, the world was dark and quiet. Inside, something was waking up. Let me tell you how we got here. Let me tell you about the 3 years that led to this moment. It started in March 3 years ago on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel sat at my kitchen table and told me about a dream. "Mom, we found it!" He said, his eyes bright with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen since he was a kid, showing me a good report card. The perfect house. 5 bedrooms, huge backyard, right in the district with the best schools. It's everything we've been looking for. Sylvia sat beside him, scrolling through photos on her phone, tilting the screen so I could see. Hardwood floors, granite countertops, a kitchen island big enough to seat 6 people. "It's beautiful," I said, and I meant it. "There's just one problem." Daniel continued, rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he was nervous. "The interest rates right now are brutal. The bank says if we had a bigger down payment, we'd qualify for a much better mortgage. We'd save thousands over the life of the loan." He paused, glancing at Sylvia, then back at me. "We were wondering if maybe you could help us out. Just with the down payment. We'll handle everything else, the mortgage, the taxes, all of it. And when we get our promotions, when things settle down, we'll pay you back. You know we're good for it." I was sitting in the kitchen of the little house where I'd raised him. The house his father and I had bought when Daniel was just 2 years old. The house where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where we'd weathered storms and arguments and makeups. I'd been a widow for 2 years by then, retired for 1. The house felt too big for just me, too full of memories that made the silence louder. "How much do you need?" I asked. Daniel's face lit up. "Honestly, if we could get about 60,000, that would change everything. That would get us the rate we need." $60,000. I didn't have that kind of cash just sitting around. But I had equity. The house was paid off. The market was good. If I sold downsized to a condo, I could free up the money and still have enough left over for myself. "Let me think about it," I said. Sylvia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We would be so grateful, Isabel. And you'd always have a place with us. Always. Your family. We take care of family." We take care of family. Those words echoed in my head for days. I thought about how much I wanted to be close to my grandchildren as they grew up. How much I wanted to be part of their lives, not just a voice on the phone or a face at obligatory holiday dinners. 2 weeks later, I listed my house. It sold faster than I expected. A young couple with a baby on the way fell in love with the backyard, the neighborhood, the charm of the place. I signed the papers in April, packed up 30 years of my life into boxes, and moved into a 2-bedroom condo on the north side of town. The condo was nice, quiet, low maintenance, but it wasn't home, not yet. In May, we all sat in the loan officer's office for the closing on Parker Lane. Daniel and Sylvia could barely sit still, grinning at each other, whispering about paint colors and furniture arrangements. The loan officer, a woman about my age with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, walked us through the paperwork. "Given the structure of this arrangement," she said, looking directly at me, "with Mrs. Rodriguez providing the full down payment and remaining financially responsible for the property, the title will stay in her name. Your son and daughter-in-law will make monthly payments to you through this family limited liability agreement. But legally, Mrs. Rodriguez, you are the owner." She slid a document across the table, pointing to a specific paragraph. "This clause here allows you to terminate their occupancy with 30 days written notice for any reason. It's standard for family lease agreements like this, just to protect all parties involved." Daniel waved his hand dismissively. Yeah, whatever the paperwork says. It's basically our house. We'll refinance in a couple years once we're more established." "Right, Mom?" I looked down at the line she'd pointed to. 30 days written notice for any reason. "Right," I said, signing my name. Sylvia leaned over and hugged me. "Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to us." We all smiled for a photo outside the house that day, standing on the front porch with the keys in Daniel's hand. Sylvia posted it online with a caption about dreams coming true and feeling blessed. Nobody mentioned my name in the post. Over the next 3 years, I learned what "we'll take care of you" really meant. It meant calling me when the air conditioning unit died in July and asking if I could cover half the replacement cost. Since technically it's your investment too, Mom. It meant Daniel showing up at my condo with a quote for a new fence explaining how it would increase the property value, hinting that I should contribute. $4,200. It meant Sylvia texting me photos of a fancy outdoor grill, the kind with side burners and a rotisserie attachment, saying Daniel really needed it for his work events. For networking Isabel, for his career. Each time I said yes, Each time I told myself it was an investment in the house, in their future, in my relationship with my grandchildren. Each time the promise of "we'll pay you back" got a little quieter, a little more vague until it disappeared altogether. The monthly payments they were supposed to make $1,800 to help cover what I would have been earning if I'd invested that $60,000 came late more often than not. Sometimes I'd get a text, "Hey Mom, things are tight this month. Can we skip this one? We'll make it up next month." Next month never came, but I didn't push. I didn't want to be the nagging mother, the one who keeps score, the one who makes everything about money. So I stayed quiet. I stayed helpful. I stayed convenient. Until Christmas night, when I sat at their table with an empty place where my gift should have been, and finally saw the pattern I'd been ignoring. That night after I got home from Christmas dinner, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Carla's gift card, about how Sylvia had made sure everyone saw her generosity toward the cleaning lady. But there was something else bothering me, something beyond just the missing gift. At 2 in the morning, I got up, made myself tea, and opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account and started scrolling back. 3 years of transactions, 3 years of transfers, payments, purchases. I created a spreadsheet. Column A, date. Column B, amount. Column C, purpose. The numbers started adding up in ways that made my chest tight. Down payment, $60,000. Monthly rent payments, they were supposed to make 18 payments out of 36, missing $32,400. Air conditioning repair, $3,500. New fence, $4,200. Outdoor grill, $2,800. Roof repairs, $6,200. New appliances, when Sylvia decided the old ones were outdated, $3,800. Christmas gifts for Tommy and Emma over 3 years, $4,200. Birthday money, $1,900. Emergency expenses, $2,400. I kept scrolling, kept adding. The number at the bottom of the spreadsheet kept growing, $121,400. $121,400. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I went back through my calendar, through old text messages, through the memories I'd been trying not to look at too closely. Last April, Tommy's school play. He'd been rehearsing for weeks, practicing his lines in my living room every time they dropped him off for me to watch. He was so excited to be a talking tree in the spring musical. "You'll come right, Grandma?" he'd asked, his little face so hopeful. "Of course I'll be there," I promised. I wouldn't miss it. The day of the play, I got dressed early, drove to the school, sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to figure out which entrance led to the auditorium. I finally called Daniel. No answer. I called Sylvia. No answer. I walked into the main office and asked where the spring play was being held. The secretary looked at me confused. "The play was yesterday afternoon," she said gently. "Are you thinking of tomorrow's talent show, yesterday?" I drove home in silence, my hands shaking on the wheel. That evening, Sylvia posted photos on social media. Tommy in his tree costume, branches taped to his arms, grinning at the camera. The caption read, "So proud of our little performer, family came out to support him." Family came out. I wasn't in a single photo. When I called Daniel the next day to ask what happened, he sounded distracted. "Oh man, Mom, I'm so sorry. We got the date mixed up. It was a crazy week. You know how it is." He didn't offer to make it up to me. Didn't suggest maybe I could take Tommy out for ice cream to celebrate. Just moved on like it was a missed dentist appointment. I told myself it was an honest mistake. Then there was my birthday in June. They came over for dinner, which I cooked, of course. After we ate, Sylvia handed me a small wrapped box with a bright smile. "Happy birthday, Isabel. Hope you love it." I opened it carefully. Inside was a nice scented candle, the expensive kind from that boutique shop downtown. Vanilla and lavender. "This is lovely," I said, genuinely pleased. "Thank you." Later that night, after they left, I was putting the candle on my bedside table when I noticed something stuck to the bottom of the box. A small piece of paper folded and tucked under the price sticker. I pulled it out and smoothed it flat. It was a gift tag, the kind that comes with wrapped presents, and it was already filled out in someone else's handwriting. "To Janet with love from the book club ladies. Happy retirement." I read it twice just to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Janet, whoever that was. Sylvia had given me someone else's gift. A candle that had been given to another woman, probably one of Sylvia's friends or co-workers, and somehow ended up in Sylvia's hands. Maybe this Janet person had passed it along. Maybe Sylvia had received it at some event and didn't want it. Either way, Sylvia had wrapped it up, put a bow on it, handed it to me with a smile on my birthday, and never bothered to check if there was an old gift tag still attached. She'd re-gifted my birthday present, and she hadn't even done it carefully enough to hide the evidence. I sat on the edge of my bed holding that little card in my hand and told myself it didn't matter. It was the thought that counted, right? Except there hadn't been any thought. Just convenience. Then there was the night in September when Sylvia called me, her voice tight with stress. "Isabel, I hate to ask, but we have an emergency. My mom fell and we need to get to the hospital right away. Can you come watch the kids? I know it's late, but we really need you." "Of course," I said, already grabbing my keys. "I'll be right there." I stayed with Tommy and Emma until almost midnight. Put them to bed, read them stories, made sure they brushed their teeth. I didn't mind. Family helps family in emergencies. The next morning I saw Sylvia's social media post. A photo from the night before, her and Daniel at a poker table with friends, drinks in hand, big smiles. The caption, "Finally got a night out. Thanks to our amazing village for making it happen." Linda hadn't fallen. There was no emergency. They just wanted a free babysitter so they could go play cards. When I asked Sylvia about it the next time I saw her, she laughed it off. "Oh, Mom got better really fast. False alarm. But since you were already coming over, we figured we might as well take advantage of the break." "You didn't mind, did you?" "I minded. I minded being lied to. I minded being treated like hired help instead of family. But I smiled and said, no, of course not. Because that's what I always did. I smiled. I stayed quiet. I made it easy for them to use me." Sitting at my table now, looking at all these memories lined up like cards in a deck, I could finally see the pattern I'd been ignoring. I wasn't cherished. I was convenient. I wasn't loved. I was useful. And the moment I stopped being useful, the moment I needed something from them, even something as small as being remembered at Christmas, I became invisible. My phone sat on the table beside the folder. I picked it up and scrolled to a name I didn't call nearly as often as I should. Rachel, my daughter, the one who lived in Colorado, the one I'd somehow let slip to the margins of my life while I poured everything into Daniel. I pressed her name and waited while it rang. "Mom," her voice came through warm but surprised. "Hey, is everything okay? It's kind of late there." "I'm fine," I said. Then I stopped. "Actually, no, I'm not fine." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I heard Rachel moving, probably stepping away from wherever she was to somewhere quieter. "What happened?" she asked, and I could hear the shift in her voice from casual to focused, the way nurses learn to assess a situation in seconds. So I told her everything. The Christmas dinner, the gifts for everyone else, Sylvia's line about the package being lost in transit, Daniel's smirk the way I'd left early, and nobody had called to check on me since. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I thought maybe the call had dropped. "Mom," Rachel finally said, her voice low and tight with controlled anger. "Are you telling me that they gave a gift to their cleaning lady but not to you?" "Yes." "The woman who cooked the entire meal?" "Yes." "The woman who sold her house so they could buy theirs?" I closed my eyes. "Yes." "That's not just rude, Mom," her voice cracked. "That's cruel. That's deliberate." "I don't think they meant to be cruel," I started, but she cut me off. "Doesn't matter what they meant. What matters is what they did. And what they did was humiliate you in front of a room full of people. They made sure everyone saw that you don't matter to them." Hearing her say it out loud, hearing someone else name what I'd been trying not to feel, made something break loose inside my chest. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "Yes, you do," Rachel said firmly. "You know exactly what to do. You just need permission to do it." "What do you mean?" "Mom, you have the right to protect yourself. Especially if the people hurting you share your last name. When did you become someone who accepts being treated like this?" I thought about that. When had I become this person? This woman who swallowed hurt and called it love. This woman who funded her own invisibility and called it generosity. "Tell me something," Rachel continued. "When was the last time they did something kind for you without needing something in return?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't think of anything. Not in months. Maybe not in years. "When was the last time they called just to see how you were doing?" Again, nothing. "When was the last time you felt genuinely valued in their presence?" The silence answered for me. "Mom," Rachel said, and her voice was gentle now. "That house, the one they live in, it's still in your name, right?" I looked down at the blue folder on my table. "Yes." "Then you have options. You know that, right? You're not stuck. You're not powerless. You own that house. not them. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long time. I pulled the folder closer and found the clause again. The one about 30 days' notice. The one I'd signed 3 years ago and then forgotten about because I never imagined I'd need it. For years, they'd forgotten that line existed. I had too. Until now. The morning after my call with Rachel, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Anger is hot and impulsive and burns itself out. This was something colder. Something that had been forged in the quiet of that Christmas dinner and tempered by 3 years of being taken for granted. I made coffee, sat at my dining table with the blue folder open, and pulled out a blank piece of paper. For a long time, I just stared at it. Writing this letter meant crossing a line I could never uncross. Once I put these words on paper, once I signed my name and dropped it in the mail, there would be no pretending it was just a passing frustration. No laughing it off. No smoothing it over. This was real. I picked up my pen and started writing. The first draft was angry. I wrote about every slight, every dismissal, every moment they'd made me feel small. I wrote about Christmas dinner and the regifted candle and the school play they'd forgotten to tell me about. I wrote until my hand cramped and the page was covered in words that tasted like vinegar. Then I read it back and crumpled it up. That wasn't the letter I needed to send. That letter would give them ammunition. They'd call me bitter, emotional, unstable. They'd twist my hurt into proof that I was overreacting, that I was being petty over one missed gift. I needed something they couldn't argue with. Something clean and factual that left no room for interpretation. I started again. To Daniel Rodriguez and Sylvia Brennan Rodriguez, my hand hesitated over the next line. Once I wrote these words, I couldn't take them back. I kept going. This letter serves as formal notice that your occupancy of the property located at 4825 Parker Lane will be terminated effective 30 days from the date of this letter as outlined in the lease agreement signed on May 15, 2023. I am exercising my right as the property owner to reclaim the residence. The property will be listed for sale. You will need to vacate the premises and remove all personal belongings by January 26, 2026. Please contact me if you have questions regarding the transition. I signed my name at the bottom, Isabel Rodriguez. Simple, professional. No accusations, no explanations, just the facts. I read it 3 more times looking for anything they could use against me. Any phrase that sounded spiteful or emotional or weak. There was nothing. Just a landlord informing her tenants that the lease was ending, which is exactly what this was. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and set it aside. Then I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. For 3 years, I'd been automatically transferring money each month into what Daniel called the House Maintenance Fund. It was supposed to cover repairs, emergencies, things that came up with owning a home. In reality, it covered whatever Daniel and Sylvia decided they wanted. New curtains, landscaping, that fancy grill. I found the automatic transfer settings and clicked Cancel. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to stop this recurring payment? I clicked yes. Another account was linked to theirs for property tax payments. I'd been covering those too, even though the agreement was that they'd handle it. Somehow it always fell back on me. I changed the settings so the payments would stop after this year's taxes were settled. One by one, I cut the threads that had been tying my finances to their comfort. It felt like pulling off a bandage. Sharp at first, then surprisingly freeing. As I was closing my laptop, I thought about Tommy and Emma. The little faces that would be confused when they had to pack up their rooms. The questions they'd ask that I wouldn't know how to answer. My chest tightened. Was I punishing innocent kids for their parents' mistakes? But then I thought about Christmas dinner. Tommy and Emma sitting at that table watching their parents hand out gifts to everyone else while their grandmother sat empty-handed. They'd seen it. They'd absorbed it. What lesson were they learning in that moment? That it's okay to humiliate someone as long as you're throwing a good party. That grandma's feelings don't matter as much as keeping up appearances. If I let this go, if I kept funding their lifestyle and swallowing my hurt, what would I be teaching those kids about respect? About boundaries? About standing up for yourself? When the people who should love you treat you like you're disposable. I closed the laptop and picked up the letter again. This wasn't about punishing children. This was about refusing to model a life where you accept cruelty in exchange for proximity. That afternoon, I drove to the post office. The woman behind the counter was someone I'd seen dozens of times over the years. She smiled when I walked up. "Certified mail?" I asked, sliding the envelope across the counter. "Sure thing, hun. Just need you to fill out this form." I wrote Daniel and Sylvia's address carefully, my handwriting steady. When I handed it back, she processed it and gave me a receipt with a tracking number. "This will get there in 2 to 3 business days," she said. "You'll be able to see when it's delivered and who signed for it." I folded the receipt and tucked it into my wallet. Holding that small piece of paper felt like holding a shield. Proof that I'd done this. Proof that I'd finally said enough. On my way home, I made one more stop. The real estate office was in a small building near the downtown square. I'd called ahead and made an appointment with an agent named Robert Chen, a calm man in his 50s who'd helped my neighbor sell her house last year. He met me in a quiet office with photos of houses on the walls. "So you're looking to sell a property you own but don't currently live in," he said, pulling out a notepad. "Can you tell me a bit about it?" I gave him the address, described the house. 5 bedrooms, large yard, good school district. He nodded, taking notes. "That area's been pretty strong lately. If the house is in good condition, you shouldn't have any trouble finding buyers. When are you thinking of listing soon?" I said. "Within the next month." "And the current occupants, will they be cooperative with showings?" I paused. "They're family. My son and his wife. They're going to need to move out first." Robert's pen stopped moving. He looked up at me, his expression neutral but understanding. "I see. And they're aware of the timeline." "They will be," I said. "Very soon." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll be honest with you, Mrs. Rodriguez. Family property sales can get complicated. Emotions run high. If you need time to sort things out on your end first, that's completely understandable. But if you're sure about moving forward, I can start pulling comps and getting a market analysis ready for you." "I'm sure," I said. "May I ask what changed? What made you decide to sell now?" I thought about how to answer that. How to explain 3 years of being taken for granted, of being made to feel like furniture in a house I owned, of being handed permission to finally choose myself. "I realized I was living in the wrong house," I said finally, "and funding the wrong life." Robert studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "I understand. I'll have the analysis ready by early January. We can meet again then to discuss listing strategy." That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd have the strength to follow through when Daniel called. Because he would call. The moment that letter arrived, the moment he realized I wasn't bluffing, he'd call. And I'd have to decide if I could really do this. If I could really stand firm while he begged, while Sylvia cried, while my grandchildren asked why Grandma was making them leave their home. I barely slept. The next morning, December 27th, I checked the tracking number on my phone while my coffee brewed. In transit. Expected delivery December 30th. 3 more days. I set the phone down and took a long, slow breath. 3 days until everything changed. 3 days until they knew. The silence from Daniel and Sylvia was almost eerie. No texts asking if I got home safely from Christmas. No calls to thank me for the pies. No photos of the kids playing with their new toys. It was like I'd never been there at all. On the 28th, I went to church. It was the small congregation I'd been attending for the past year. Nothing fancy, just a simple service with people who knew my name but not my story. After the service, a woman named Margaret approached me. She was probably 10 years older than me, her hair white and her hands weathered with age. "Isabel," she said quietly, "do you have a minute?" We sat in one of the back pews while people filed out around us. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed troubled today," Margaret said. "I don't mean to pry, but if you need someone to talk to..." I looked at her, this woman who barely knew me, showing more concern than my own son had in weeks. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "If your child treated you poorly repeatedly, and you had the ability to set a boundary, would you do it even if people judged you for it?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "My son and his wife lived with me for 2 years after they got married," she finally said. "They were supposed to be saving money for their own place, but somehow that never happened. They ate my food, used my utilities, and treated me like a landlord they didn't have to pay. When I finally asked them to leave, my son didn't speak to me for 6 months. People at church whispered about it, said I was being selfish. That family should stick together no matter what." "What did you do?" I asked. I stuck to my decision. And you know what? After those 6 months, my son came back. He apologized. He said moving out forced him to grow up to take responsibility. Our relationship now is better than it was when he was using me. She looked at me directly. "Setting boundaries isn't cruel, Isabel. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do. even when it doesn't feel like it. When I got home that afternoon, there was a note tucked into my door from my neighbor across the hall, a woman named Ruth who I chatted with sometimes in the elevator but didn't know well. The note was short, Isabel. I saw your son and his wife here earlier knocking on your door. If you need someone to run interference, just let me know. I raised 4 kids. I know what it's like when they think they're entitled to more than they've earned. You're stronger than you think. Ruth, I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. Over the next few days, I started to notice something. Yes, some people would judge me. But there were others, quiet voices, women my age, who'd lived through their own versions of this story. The woman at the coffee shop who always remembered my order mentioned casually that she'd finally stopped lending money to her daughter after years of never being paid back. My friend from book club admitted she'd been covering her son's car payments for 3 years because he said he couldn't afford them, only to see him post pictures of an expensive vacation online. Each conversation was a small reminder that I wasn't alone, that this pattern of adult children taking advantage of their parents' generosity wasn't unique to me. And each conversation made me feel a little less guilty, a little more certain. December 30th, 10:42 a.m. I was washing dishes when my phone buzzed on the counter. I dried my hands and checked the tracking number. Delivered. Signed by S. Rodriguez. Sylvia had signed for it. I set the phone face down and went back to the dishes, my hands steady under the warm water. At 10:45 a.m., the first text came through. Daniel, did you send us something? Sylvia says there's a weird letter with your name on it. I rinsed the last plate and put it in the rack to dry. At 11:03 a.m., reality started to hit. Daniel, Mom, seriously, what is this? Call me. Daniel, this has to be a mistake. You can't be serious about this. Daniel, Mom, pick up the phone. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my dining table. The phone kept buzzing. I could see the notifications piling up on the lock screen, but I didn't reach for it. For 3 years, every time they texted, I jumped. Didn't matter if I was in the middle of something. Didn't matter if it was late at night or early in the morning. When they needed me, I responded immediately. Not anymore. By noon, Sylvia started texting too. Sylvia, hey Isabel. Nate showed me the letter you sent. I think there might be some confusion. Can we talk about this? I'm sure we can work it out. I sipped my tea and watched a bird land on the railing of my little balcony. Sylvia, we've made this house a home. You know how much the kids love it here. You wouldn't really make them leave, would you? Then an hour later, the sweetness cracked. Sylvia, I don't understand why you're doing this. After everything we've done to include you in our lives, this is how you repay us. We invited you to Christmas. We made you part of our family, and this is what we get. I read that one twice. They invited me to Christmas. Like I should be grateful they allowed me to cook their meal and sit at their table while they humiliated me. They made me part of their family, like I wasn't already family, like being Daniel's mother wasn't enough on its own. I set the phone down and didn't respond. By evening, Daniel's messages had gone from confused to angry. Daniel, this is insane. You're actually going to kick us out of our home, the home we've built together, where your grandkids live. Our home. There it was again. That phrase that only appeared when it was convenient. Daniel, you can't do this. We have kids. We have jobs. We can't just pack up and leave in 30 days. That's not how this works. Actually, it was exactly how it worked. He'd signed the papers. He'd agreed to the terms. He just never thought I'd use them. Daniel, call me right now. We need to fix this before it gets out of hand. Before it gets out of hand. Like I was a problem that needed to be managed. Like this was some emotional outburst they could talk me down from if they just used the right words. I turned my phone on silent and made myself dinner. The next morning I woke up to 17 new messages. Most were from Daniel and Sylvia, cycling through the same arguments, the same guilt trips, the same demands that I call them immediately. But there was one from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Jennifer Ramos from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. I received a call from Daniel Rodriguez expressing concern about a notice he received regarding the property at 4825 Parker Lane. He mentioned you're planning to list the home for sale. As HOA president, I'll need to coordinate with you regarding any transition. Additionally, Mr. Rodriguez seemed quite distressed about an upcoming event he'd planned to host at the property. Please give me a call when you have a moment to discuss. I read it slowly. Daniel had already contacted the HOA. He was scrambling, trying to find someone, anyone who might be able to stop this. And there was an event he'd planned. Something he was worried about. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, so I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, it was Rachel. "Hey, Mom, it's me calling from my work phone because I figured you might not answer numbers you don't know." "Listen, Daniel just called me." "Well, actually, he called Michael first, but when that didn't work, he called me directly. He's completely freaking out. He wants me to talk you out of whatever you're doing. I told him I support your decision and that he needs to deal with this directly with you, not through me. Just wanted to give you a heads up that he's going to keep trying to find ways around you. Stay strong, okay? Call me later if you need to talk." I saved the message and felt a small warmth in my chest. At least someone understood. That afternoon, Sylvia sent a voice memo instead of a text. I almost didn't listen to it, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice came through tearful shaking designed to pull at my heartstrings. "Isabel, please. I don't know what we did to make you so angry, but whatever it was, I'm sorry. We're both sorry. This is just so sudden and so extreme. Daniel's boss is expecting him to host a New Year's party here. It's important for his career. If we have to cancel, if we have to tell everyone we're being forced to move, he's going to look unstable, unreliable. It could cost him opportunities. Is that really what you want? To hurt your own son's career over a misunderstanding?" I stopped the recording. So that was the event. A work party. Something Daniel had probably been bragging about for weeks, promising his boss and colleagues a nice evening at his beautiful home in the good neighborhood. Except it wasn't his home. It was mine. And he'd forgotten that until it was too late. The voicemail from Linda Brennan came next, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Isabel, I'm very concerned about what I've been hearing. Sylvia is beside herself. Those poor children are going to be uprooted from their school, their friends, everything they know. I understand you might have had your feelings hurt at Christmas, but don't you think this is a bit extreme? Surely we can all sit down like adults and talk this through." My feelings hurt, like I'd pouted over a forgotten birthday card instead of being publicly humiliated and dismissed. I deleted the voicemail. Later that evening, Robert the realtor called. I actually answered this one. "Mrs. Rodriguez just wanted to confirm we're still on for our meeting this Friday to go over the market analysis and discuss listing strategy. I've pulled some recent sales in the area, and I think you're going to be pleased with the numbers." "Friday works perfectly," I said. "Great. And just so I'm prepared, have the current occupants been notified of the timeline?" They have. "And how are they taking it?" I glanced at my phone at the wall of unread messages at the voicemails I hadn't listened to. "About as well as expected," I said. After I hung up, another text came through from Daniel. "Daniel, Mom, call me. It's urgent." I stared at that word. Urgent. 3 years ago when I needed help moving furniture that wasn't urgent. When I was sick with the flu and asked if someone could pick up groceries for me that wasn't urgent. When I mentioned I was feeling lonely, and maybe we could have dinner together sometime, just the family, that definitely wasn't urgent. But now that their comfortable life was at risk, now that their social status and Daniel's career party and Sylvia's perfect image were threatened, suddenly everything was urgent. The urgency wasn't about me. It never had been. It was about them. About protecting what they had. About keeping me at the role I'd always played, the quiet bankroll who knew her place. I set my phone on the counter and walked away. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them feel just for a moment what it's like when the person you've been taking for granted stops being available at your convenience. I'd spent 3 years being urgent for them. They could spend 30 days being urgent for themselves. January 2nd, 17 p.m. I was standing at my stove stirring chicken soup when I heard the first heavy thud against my condo door, the kind of knocking that makes the frame rattle. "Mom, please, you have to open up." Daniel's voice, louder than I'd heard it in years, desperate in a way that should have made me rush to unlock the door. It didn't. I turned the heat down under the pot and wiped my hands on a dish towel, listening. "Isabel, please." Sylvia's voice cut through, next high and shaky. "We're sorry. Okay, just open the door. We need to fix this today. It can't wait." I glanced at the clock. Right on schedule. Then came the lighter knocking. Small fists against wood. "Grandma," Emma's voice trembling. "Daddy says we have to talk to you. Please open." That part, I'll admit, made something twist in my chest. The part of me that used to jump at anyone's discomfort, that used to soothe and fix and smooth over every rough edge, wanted to rush to that door. But the new part of me, the one they'd built carelessly over years of taking, just set the spoon down on the counter and took a slow breath. They had finally read the letter. They had finally understood what it meant when I signed my name at the bottom. 4 days. It had taken them 4 days to realize I wasn't bluffing. 4 days ago, they couldn't be bothered to give me a $5 scented candle. Now they were at my door, voices cracking, begging like their entire world was collapsing. I walked slowly toward the door, my slippers quiet on the tile floor. I could hear them shuffling out there, whispering urgently to each other. She has to listen. What if she doesn't answer? Mom, come on, we know you're in there. I stopped a few feet from the door, arms crossed, just listening. The 4 days since Christmas had been the quietest stretch I'd had in years. No sudden requests to babysit. No texts asking if I could pick up groceries for them on my way over. No calls from Sylvia wondering if I could just pop by to let the repair guy in while they were at work. Just silence. At first I thought maybe they really hadn't noticed. Maybe the letter got buried under their holiday mess. Maybe they assumed it was another one of those official-looking envelopes they could ignore. But then the text started. And I knew. They'd noticed. They just hadn't believed it. I reached for the door chain, then stopped. 4 days earlier, they couldn't be bothered to pretend I mattered. They'd handed gifts to every person at that table, the piano teacher, the church friends, even Carla. The cleaning woman got a gift card and a speech about how much they appreciated her hard work. But me, the woman who had sold her own home so they could have theirs, the woman who had stood in that kitchen all day making sweet potatoes and pies and enough food to feed a small army, I got a smirk and a lie about shipping delays. Now they were here desperate and frantic because they'd finally realized that the person they'd been treating like furniture had the power to move all the pieces off the board. "Isabel, please," Sylvia called through the door, her voice breaking now. "We're begging you. Just let us in. Let us explain." I stood there, hand on the chain, feeling the weight of that moment. They wanted to explain. They wanted to fix it. They wanted me to open the door, let them in, let them apologize just enough to make this go away so their lives could go back to normal. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I slid the chain into place and opened the door just wide enough to see them clearly. Daniel stood closest, his shoulders hunched, his face drawn and tired in a way I'd never seen before. Sylvia was behind him, her eyes red and puffy, mascara smudged at the corners. And there, partially hidden behind their legs, were Tommy and Emma, each clutching a stuffed animal like a security blanket. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice strained. "Can we please come in? We need to talk about this." "We can talk right here," I said calmly. Sylvia stepped forward, her hands clasped together like she was praying. "Isabel, please. The kids are with us. Can't we at least do this inside?" I looked down at Tommy and Emma. They were staring at me with wide, confused eyes. This wasn't their fault. None of this was their fault. But I also wasn't going to let them be used as shields. "What do you want to say?" I asked, my voice steady. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. "What do I want to say, Mom? You're kicking us out of our home. You sent us a letter saying we have 30 days to pack up our entire lives and leave. That's what I want to talk about." "It's not your home," I said quietly. "It's a house I own, a house you lease from me, and I'm exercising my right to end that lease just like the paperwork says I can. We have kids, Mom." His voice rose slightly. "We can't just pack up and move in 30 days. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find a place that fast, in this market with our budget?" "You've had 3 years to save money," I said, "to plan, to build equity of your own. What happened to all those promotions you kept talking about? All the times you said things were about to turn around?" Sylvia's voice cut in sharp and defensive. "This isn't about money, Isabel. This is about you being vindictive. You're punishing us because your feelings got hurt at Christmas." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "My feelings got hurt," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you think this is about?" "What else would it be?" Sylvia threw her hands up. "One dinner doesn't go perfectly and suddenly you're destroying our lives." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she genuinely didn't understand. Even now, even standing at my door begging, she still couldn't see it. "Sylvia," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "you gave a gift to every single person at that table. You gave one to your parents. You gave one to your church friends. You gave one to Mrs. Patterson. You even gave one to Carla, your cleaning lady. But you looked at me, the woman who cooked that entire meal, the woman who funded the house you were sitting in, and you said my gift must have been lost in the mail." "It was a mistake," Sylvia said quickly. The package really didn't arrive in time. It wasn't personal. Then why did you smirk when you said it? I asked. Why did Daniel joke about me being patient? Why did people laugh? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. Am I? Because from where I was sitting, it felt very much in proportion. It felt like the truth finally being said out loud, that I'm convenient when you need something but invisible when you don't. Tommy tugged on Sylvia's sleeve. Mommy, why is Grandma mad at us? Sylvia's eyes filled with fresh tears. She crouched down and pulled him close. She's not mad at you, baby. Grandma's just upset right now. Are we really going to have to move? Emma asked, her voice small. I looked at her, at those innocent eyes trying to make sense of adult problems. This was the part I'd been dreading, the part where I had to be honest without being cruel. I crouched down too, meeting her at eye level through the gap in the door. You might have to move, sweetheart, I said gently. But you're going to be okay. Kids are tougher than they think. And no matter where you live, I'll still be your grandma. Can't you just let us stay? She whispered. Please. The words hit me right in the chest. But I pushed through. If I do that, I said softly, I'd be teaching everyone that it's okay to treat people badly as long as you want what they have. That's not a lesson I want you to learn. She stared at me, processing, then nodded slowly, like maybe she understood more than I expected. Daniel pulled her back, his jaw tight. Mom, please. We'll make this right. We'll throw you a big birthday party. I'll buy you whatever you want. Just call the realtor and tell him you changed your mind. Tell the HOA it was a mistake. I'm not calling anyone, I said. You're really going to do this, Sylvia said, her voice rising. You're really going to ruin our lives over one bad night. I'm not ruining your lives. I'm reclaiming mine. Sylvia's face twisted. Fine. You want to know what this really is? This is you being bitter and lonely. You're jealous that we have what you don't, a family, a home, a life. So you're tearing ours down to make yourself feel better. I absorbed the words. Let them bounce off the wall I'd built over the past week. If that's what you need to believe, I said calmly. If you do this, Sylvia continued, her voice shaking, you're going to lose us. We'll have to move maybe to another state. The kids won't see you. You'll be alone in this condo with no one. Is that what you want? To die alone because you couldn't forgive one mistake. There it was. The fear they thought would break me. The threat wrapped up as concern. Growing old alone. Dying alone. The nightmare every mother is supposed to carry. But I thought about Rachel's voice on the phone, fierce and supportive. I thought about Margaret at church. About Ruth's note slipped under my door. I thought about the life I could build, the choices I could make, the peace I'd felt this past week. I'd rather be alone than used, I said quietly. And I'm not alone. I have a daughter who calls to check on me. I have grandchildren who send me drawings. I have friends who see me as more than a wallet. I have options that don't involve begging my own child to treat me like I matter. Daniel flinched like I'd slapped him. So that's it, he said. You're really going to let strangers buy our house? Your house. I raised an eyebrow. It's interesting that you still call it that. For 3 years it was only my house when you needed me to sign something or write a check or fix a problem. But when you wanted to brag or post photos or throw parties, it was yours. Sylvia grabbed Daniel's arm, her eyes desperate. We can fight this, she hissed loud enough for me to hear. Get a lawyer. She's old. How strong can her case be? Maybe we can argue she's not thinking clearly. I heard every single word. By all means, I said, my voice steady and cold. Talk to a lawyer. They'll be happy to explain the paperwork you both signed, the lease agreement, the 30-day notice clause, the line that says I can end your occupancy for any reason. They'll explain it very clearly. Daniel stared at me like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. You're serious, he whispered. Yes, I sapped his head. For the first time in a very long time, I am completely serious. Sylvia's face crumpled. What about Daniel's work party his boss is expecting to come to the house? If we have to cancel, if we have to admit we're being evicted by his own mother, it's going to destroy his reputation. Then I suggest you find a new venue, I said. You have 30 days. That should be enough time. I started to close the door. Mom, wait, Daniel said, his voice breaking. Please, we can fix this. Just tell us what you want. What do we have to do? I paused, looking at him through the narrowing gap. I want you to understand that respect isn't optional, I said quietly. That people aren't tools you use and discard when they're no longer convenient. That your mother isn't a backup plan or a safety net or a punchline at your dinner table. We didn't mean it like that, he said weakly. Maybe not, but that's how it felt. And I'm done feeling that way. I closed the door, slid the deadbolt into place, and stood there listening to the silence on the other side. After a long moment, I heard Sylvia's muffled voice. Come on. She's not going to change her mind tonight. Footsteps. The sound of the elevator doors opening and closing. Then silence. I walked back to my kitchen, my hands steady, and finished making my soup. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't the one left waiting. They were. January 7th, 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I'd been lying in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. The door confrontation kept playing in my mind. Daniel's desperation, Sylvia's accusations, Emma's small voice asking why. Finally, I gave up on sleep. I got up, made tea, and opened my laptop. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. Needed to see the full picture. I logged into the county property records website. It was public information available to anyone who looked. I typed in the address for 4825 Parker Lane and waited for the results to load. What I saw made my tea go cold in my hands. There in the transaction history, home equity line of credit, September 2024. $35,000. I stared at the screen, reading it again and again, trying to make sense of it. A home equity line on my house, taken out less than 4 months ago. But I'd never authorized anything like that. I'd never even discussed it with Daniel. I clicked through to the detailed records. The application listed Daniel Rodriguez as property manager, with authorization to access equity for property improvements and maintenance. Property improvements, maintenance. My hands were shaking as I opened a new browser tab and went to Sylvia's social media. I scrolled back to September to October. There, a photo album titled Paradise Found, pictures of Daniel and Sylvia on a beach, crystal blue water, fancy resort, drinks with umbrellas, Emma and Tommy building sandcastles, 2 weeks in Hawaii, according to the captions. Living our best life. So grateful for this much-needed family getaway. #blessed matchmaking. Memories at Hawaii. Dreaming. The comments were full of people asking how they could afford such a nice trip. Sylvia's response, we've been saving for years. Sometimes you just have to prioritize making memories with your babies. Saving for years. They'd used my house, my equity, as collateral for a vacation. While I was eating frozen dinners in my condo, rationing my own grocery budget because I'd given them $60,000, they were sipping Mai Tais on a beach they'd paid for with my property. I kept scrolling. Found more photos from the summer. A new outdoor furniture set, easily $3,000. New landscaping with decorative stonework. A hot tub being installed in the backyard. All of it after that home equity line. I picked up my phone and called Rachel. It was 5 a.m. in Colorado, but this couldn't wait. Mom, her voice was groggy. What's wrong? Did Daniel ever mention refinancing? I asked. What note? Wait. I heard her moving, waking up. Last summer, Sylvia posted photos of that Hawaii trip. I remember thinking, how can they afford that? But I figured maybe Daniel got a bonus or something. They used my house, I said, my voice hollow. They took out a home equity line for $35,000, used my property as collateral, without telling me. Silence on the other end. Mom, Rachel said finally, her voice sharp with anger. That's fraud. He misrepresented his relationship to the property. You could— I know, I said. I could pursue legal action. Take them to court. Make this even uglier than it already is. But you're not going to. No, I'm just going to sell the house. Walk away clean. The HELOC will be paid off at closing. The buyers will get a clear title. And I'll be free of all of it. You're sure? I thought about it. About dragging this through courts, through lawyers, through years of family warfare. I don't want revenge, Rachel. I just want my life back. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, looking at all the evidence laid out in front of me. $121,000 over 3 years, plus $35,000 in unauthorized equity. $156,000. I could have bought a nice house outright in some places for that amount. Could have traveled the world. Could have lived comfortably on the interest alone for years. Instead, I'd funded a lifestyle for two people who couldn't even be bothered to buy me a Christmas gift. I closed the laptop and looked out the window. Dawn was starting to break, pale light creeping across the sky. The anger I expected didn't come. Neither did the grief. What I felt instead was clarity. This wasn't just about Christmas dinner. It had never been just about Christmas dinner. That was simply the moment the curtain fell, the moment I finally saw what had been true all along. I wasn't a mother to Daniel. I was a resource, a means to an end, a checkbook with a pulse. And I was done. January 12th, the coffee shop meeting. Rachel had flown in the day before. We'd spent the evening at my condo just talking. Not about Daniel, not about the house, just talking. The way we used to before I'd let geography and guilt create distance between us. Now we sat together in a corner booth of a neutral coffee shop waiting. Daniel and Sylvia arrived at exactly 2 p.m. looking exhausted. Daniel's suit was wrinkled. Sylvia's usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Rachel sat next to me, a clear signal of whose side she was on. "Mom," Daniel started, "thank you for agreeing to meet." "Let's just talk," I said. They sat across from us. Sylvia reached for Daniel's hand. "We're sorry," Daniel said. "For Christmas, for all of it. We messed up. We should have had a gift for you." "This isn't about a gift," I said. "Then what is it about?" Sylvia's voice had an edge. "Because from where we're sitting, you're destroying our family over one bad night." Rachel leaned forward. "One bad night, let's talk about the school play you didn't tell her about. Or the birthday gift that still had someone else's name on it. Or the emergency lie to get free babysitting." Sylvia's face flushed. "Those were mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes." "Patterns aren't mistakes," Rachel said coldly. "Patterns are choices." I pulled out my laptop and turned it to face them. The spreadsheet. 3 years of numbers. $121,000, I said. "That's what I've given you over 3 years. Daniel went pale. "We were going to pay you back." "When?" I asked. "You've missed 17 rent payments. You took out a home equity line on my house without telling me. Used my property as collateral for a vacation." "We needed that trip," Sylvia's voice cracked. "Daniel was stressed from work. We were burnt out from the kids. You don't understand the pressure we're under." "I understand that you took $35,000 from my equity to go to Hawaii while I was eating frozen dinners because I gave you my house money." The table went silent. "Do you know what the worst part is?" I said quietly. "It's not the money. It's that you made me invisible. I was only visible when you needed something. The moment I needed something, even just to be remembered at Christmas, I disappeared." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "We didn't mean to make you feel that way." "But you did. And didn't mean to doesn't erase 3 years of hurt." "So what?" Sylvia said, her voice rising. "You're just going to punish us forever. Take away our home. Uproot our children. That's your solution." "It's not punishment," I said. "It's a boundary. I'm not funding a life where I'm treated as optional." I closed the laptop and looked directly at Daniel. "I'm selling the house. The paperwork is in motion. You have until January 26th to find a new place. I'm moving to Colorado to be near Rachel." Daniel's eyes went wide. "You're leaving Texas?" "Yes. I'm starting over. Somewhere I'm wanted, not just needed." Sylvia pointed at Rachel. "If you do this, you're choosing her over us, over your grandchildren." Rachel stood up, her voice shaking with controlled fury. "She's not choosing me over you. You made the choice 3 years ago when you decided she didn't matter. She's just finally accepting what you've been saying all along." "Daniel," I said, looking at my son, "please, give us another chance." "I gave you 1,095 chances," I said. "One for every day of the past 3 years. I'm done." I stood up. Rachel stood with me. We walked out of that coffee shop together, leaving Daniel and Sylvia sitting in stunned silence. Outside, the January air was cold and sharp. "You okay?" Rachel asked. I took a deep breath. "I will be." Daniel had asked if he could bring the kids by one last time before they moved. Without Sylvia. I'd said yes. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find Tommy and Emma standing there with construction paper and crayons in their hands. Daniel stood behind them, looking smaller somehow. "Hi, Grandma," Emma said quietly. "Hi, sweethearts. Come in." The kids came in and immediately sat at my dining table, spreading out their art supplies. Daniel lingered in the doorway. "Can we talk?" he asked. "While they're drawing." We went to the small balcony, leaving the door cracked so we could hear the kids. They found a rental, Daniel said. 3 bedrooms, smaller than the house. Emma has to share a room with Tommy. That's normal for many families, I said. I know, I wanted better for them. So did I. But better isn't just about square footage. It's about values, about how you treat people. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I really am sorry, Mom. I didn't see it. I didn't see what we were doing to you. I believe you didn't see it, I said. That's what hurts most. Is there any chance in the future that we could fix this? I looked at him, this man who used to be my little boy who I'd given everything to raise. Maybe, I said, but it won't look like it did before. I'm not your safety net anymore. I'm not your backup plan. If you want a relationship, it has to be because you value me, not because you need something. He nodded slowly. I understand. We stood there in silence for a while, then went back inside. Tommy and Emma had finished their drawings. They held them up proudly. These are for you, Grandma, Tommy said. So you remember us in Colorado. The pictures showed our family stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. But in Emma's drawing, there was something extra, a house with 2 doors. One labeled Texas and one labeled Colorado. A path connected them. So you can come visit, Emma explained. And we can visit you. I hugged them both, fighting back tears. I love them. Thank you. As they were leaving, Daniel turned back. Mom, yes, you were right about all of it. And I'm going to be better. Not for you, for them. He gestured to the kids. I don't want them to grow up thinking this is how you treat people you love. After they left, I sat on my couch holding those drawings and let myself cry for the first time since Christmas. Not tears of pain, tears of release. 3 days later, the moving truck came. I wasn't there. Rachel and I were at a cafe planning my move to Colorado. By evening, they were gone. January 26th, the house stood empty. I went there one last time, walking through the rooms where I'd funded so many memories that weren't mine. I turned off all the lights, locked the door, and didn't look back. On the front door, I found an envelope taped there. Inside was a letter from Daniel and a check for $5,000.